So I track my Quran progress almost every single day for more than a year now. And alhamdulillah, as a result of that, I've been able to memorize around 10 juz of Quran while also being at work and school. And inshallah, I'm going to try to distill all the lessons that I've learned from this and try to give it to you in this video. So honestly, the first thing I learned is that you really do not need a perfect setup. You don't need perfect conditions, because there was so many times at the beginning of this journey where I was delaying the start of this. Even when I was younger, I like the thought hit my mind, maybe I should start, memorizing Quran, yada, yada, yada. But all these ideas that came into my mind was that, to memorize Quran, you have to be like super up there. You have to be just like living in the desert day in, day out. You have to be in like this school in the middle of nowhere where it's like super intense. Otherwise, there's no way you can memorize big portions of the Quran. Or in reality, that was just totally false. I started this Quran journey literally from zero, not even knowing how to read the Quran properly. And just in a quick amount of time, you can already start memorizing like bigger portions than you might think. So apart from that little mindset lessons, there's also like some tactical lessons that I definitely learned from memorizing Quran. One of them being is that like small deposits of memorization every single day, even if it's just a small amount, is actually way more beneficial for you than you might think. Because I found like a lot of the progress on this journey actually comes down to your behavior, your habits, more so than like the technical stuff. Because once you learn tajweed, once you learn how to read the Quran and you're sufficient now, which only takes like a few weeks, then it really just comes down to you. And one of the best ways, in my opinion, that I had like consistent behavior with the Quran where every single day I was memorizing is when I would just take on small little chunks day in, day out. Essentially what that does is it builds this kind of momentum. So you don't even want to fall off, and the likelihood of you falling off and kind of going this up and down cycle where, those stories of people who started memorizing and they stopped for like 10 years and they come back to it and they keep on this up and down cycle. That might be because they just took big portions at a time. And in reality, like if you just take these small portions at a time and you just memorize whatever is convenient for you at this point in time, you're probably going to stick with it for way longer and then make more progress as a result of that. When I first started memorizing the Quran, I only started by memorizing a few lines out of the page. And then as time went on, I added on to it. And alhamdulillah, now I can memorize a page in the same time it took me in the beginning to just memorize a few lines. Another tip that I'll give you that really helped me is trying to listen to the Quran like as much as possible and almost like obsessively. Like everywhere I would go, I'll try to listen to the Quran. Even to this day, I try to memorize from listening as much as possible because it helps so much when you actually come to that particular section of the Quran. Or what a lot of people do as well, sometimes I would do this, is that you just remember the particular page you're on right now, you can just play it on your ear on repeat. So when you're walking, go about in your day, you're already hearing that page. So when you come to memorize it later in the day, it flows way easier and it's way quicker to memorize than if when you just like never did that and you're just memorizing it like totally foreignly, you've never seen it or heard of it in your life. Just by doing this, you shave a lot of the time it requires to memorize a page. And again, you'll be more likely to want to memorize because you'll see that you're doing it quicker. And then by the end of the week, by the end of the month, you'll be surprised with how much you memorized. Another little lesson I'll give you is that if I don't memorize or revise any Quran in the beginning of the day, the likelihood of me doing it at the end of the day is way lower. We already know that there's tons of barakah in the morning hours, but especially like when you're on this hib journey, ideally you want to have like kind of two blocks, one when you're memorizing and then also one when you're revising Quran. And ideally, if you don't do any of those in the beginning of the day, early on in the day, what's going to feel like later in the day is that you have so much to do and then eventually you just ignore it all. And then if this keeps happening consistently, and then you look back the week and the month and you barely memorize anything at all, it's going to discourage you from even wanting to continue on this path. So yeah, make sure that like early on in the day, ideally like right after you wake up, you're doing something with the Quran, at least you're memorizing or revising and doing something, because it's just chipping away at that time and it's kind of building momentum for the rest of the day to dedicate to the Quran, inshallah. Now, those were some lessons I learned, like how to make the Quran more efficient. But how do you actually like change your behavior so you become like the type of person who can like actually memorize day in, day out with like consistency over a long period of time? Because I don't know about you, but the generation I grew up in, how I grew up, my personal stories, I was not like that at all. I had like zero patience when I was growing up. Just the whole like technology scene, just the whole environment around me wasn't really building something where I could do something consistently for like years and years on end. It was more so like if I don't see any progress in a day, a week, I'll just kick the habit altogether. But the thing is, the Quran is not like that. Like you will not make significant progress with your memorization in a day, a week, or a month. This takes like time to compound. No matter what kind of strategy you're using, it still takes time to memorize. So what I did is I made sure that I cut like all the distractions to make sure I stood firm on this path, because let's be honest, there's so many other things that you could be doing. You could be playing the game, you could be on your phone, you could be doing all these apps that are way more stimulating than just trying to memorize a page of Quran. Obviously, that can be like a huge detriment to your hifd. So essentially, because of this, there's been so many times on the journey where I went into periods where I literally deleted every single app off my phone. I blocked all the YouTube websites, all the social media websites. And I really realized like you only have so much time in a day and it takes time to memorize Quran. So you want to like make sure that you're being super efficient with your time and trying to be productive with it as much as possible. And honestly, you only really need to do this like in the beginning, because I feel like once you've like been memorizing for a while and you build that momentum, trust me when I say like the feeling you get from making progress with the Quran outweighs any kind of like video you can watch, any kind of video game you can play. It feels way more satisfying to like memorize a page of Quran like with strength than any like video would give you. And this is someone, by the way, who grew up like, always on technology. And that kind of brings me to another lesson I learned, is that the beginning of memorizing is actually the hardest. If you can just stick with it for maybe the first 3-5 juz or something like that, it gets way more easy in terms of like that kind of barrier that you have to wanting to memorize. Instead of looking at it as like a huge thing, a huge deal, something that consumes so much of your time, you actually kind of start to look forward to it more, because it's just totally natural. When we see progress in ourselves, when we see progress in the thing we're doing, we're actually going to want to do it even more. So don't get too discouraged if you're someone who's just starting out and you're like, oh, I'm not seeing any progress yet. Trust me, you're going to soon, inshallah, get into the phase where you're starting to memorize a lot, and you actually start to look forward, wanting to keep memorizing, wanting to push yourself to memorize more. You know, even on days from the outside looking in, looks like an awesome, like 10 out of 10 day. You might have done stuff with your friends, yada, yada, yada. It looks awesome, like you had a cool day that day. Even in my head, even when I had those, in the back of my head, I'd always be thinking, even when I was outside doing something cool, I'd always be thinking like, man, I kind of have to like memorize this page. Like it was always on my mind. And that kind of goes to show that once you get into this habit, it becomes a part of your identity, where if you don't memorize, or if you don't even like, you know, revise Quran all that day, it starts to become weird. And it was really at that point where I could start trusting myself that like I would continuously memorize and revise. Whereas in the beginning, I had to like really remind myself, okay, I have to make this a habit. But once it's actually a habit, once you get those first few juz in, and the Quran like really becomes like a normal thing in your life, the same way as like, you know, brushing your teeth, eating food, all this stuff, you're going to actually like want, it's not really going to become like a need anymore. It's going to become more of like a want. And again, when you actually like want to do something, that's when like the most progress is like unlocked. Another lesson that I learned, if you're doing this journey solo, it's way harder than if you're doing it with someone else. And what I mean by that is like the first few weeks of me memorizing, I didn't have a teacher or anything like that until it was recommended to me like, oh, you should get a teacher to make sure you're doing tajweed properly, you're memorizing correctly and stuff like that. So I ended up getting a teacher online. And just from that, it accelerated my progress a ton. Because when you're doing stuff by yourself, you generally have no accountability. It's really just you, right? You have to force yourself to do it. It's really just out of your discipline. But when you have someone else who's actually like waiting for you to memorize something new and then present it the next week and then like be expected to correct you, it gives you this kind of urgency like, oh, okay, I have to memorize. If you're looking for a similar place like that, that gives you that accountability, but also corrects you in tajweed and kind of helps you with like the technical stuff at memorizing. And also you want like courses and resources that helps you in like the behavioral side at memorizing to make sure you're making progress with the Quran, feel free to join our school community, inshallah. The link will be in the description. And you see, that's the stuff that I learned from the Quran, more so about like how to memorize, how to like do on this hifz journey. But those stuff that the lessons that like the Quran gave me through this whole journey, that like genuinely like changed my entire outlook on life. And it was more so like an emotional change rather than some like lesson that I could kind of give you like through words. But one of the things you'll probably experience the more you kind of embark on this hifz journey is that you'll start to like realize the things that really matter to you, like on a personal level. You see, when I started memorizing, I was still kind of in that school system, the work system way of thinking where you're just like on autopilot. The days are kind of just flying by. It wasn't until I started memorizing and then getting like kind of good at memorizing, understand what I'm memorizing, and it became like a real consistent habit. And then it kind of just like knocked away all the beliefs, all the mindsets I had just about day-to-day life, like that I had prior to memorizing. Like honestly, till this day, I still remember memorizing pages where like my whole week changed for that day. Like I didn't care about no homework, no work assignment. Like honestly, I was thinking at such like a deeper level than any of this surface level stuff. Like I remember these verses like Allah الذي خلقكم من ضعف ثم جعل من بعد ضعف قوة ثم جعل من بعد قوة ضعف وشيبة يخلق ما يشاء وهو العزيز الحكيم. And I remember like when I would memorize verses like that, even there's even similar, this is a mutashabiyah, so it's in like across the Quran, right? Similar things. And it would really just change like so, like I wouldn't really care about anything else like day to day. And it was kind of in a good way, like, you know, I had a much more like deeper outlook on life. It's kind of hard to like transfer it like via video, but I guess like what I could say is it makes you like way more stoic in the sense that just day to day stuff, it doesn't really affect you as much when you start memorizing Quran, because every single page that you're memorizing, every single page you're hitting is so much more deep than anything that's really going on in your day-to-day life. Almost everyone's essentially experienced that feeling where you kind of like wake up, you get pulled out of that like autopilot mode, and usually it's because maybe someone you know died, someone you know in your family got sick, you got sick or something, and it pulls you out of that like whole autopilot way of thinking. And essentially the Quran, when you start memorizing and kind of like understanding what you're memorizing, every single day it's doing that for you. So that's actually one of the lessons that I learned, is that when you're memorizing, it's not actually that you're not like gaining anything, or you're not gaining any benefit from it in this life. You're actually gaining a lot of it, because just that feeling of like always having a constant reminder, like is honestly priceless. Like you couldn't even put a price on that. But yeah, inshallah, that was like the lessons of like 500 days of memorizing condensed into this video. And inshallah is a benefit. But yeah, if you're also looking for a place to memorize, a place to present what you memorize and get correct, inshallah, and also just looking for resources like courses and like tools and stuff to help you memorize faster, feel free to join our school community, inshallah. The link's in the description. But yeah, inshallah, that was a benefit. Assalamu alaikum.